It's no secret that some of the world's greatest science fiction writers have been Jews, authors like Isaac Asimov and David Brin. The man known as the world's greatest science fiction fan, Forrest Ackerman, is Jewish too. You know, there's some ancient Jewish stories that actually seem to go beyond science fiction. And I can't help but wonder if in the Jewish world, truth is really stranger than fiction. As a boy, I loved to read science fiction books and watch science fiction TV shows and movies, and obviously I wasn't alone in my interest. I read a lot of the Tom Swift books, although today I don't really remember what they were about. And I was an avid viewer of Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, and some of those shows I can remember to this very day. Well, then there was the classic science fiction movie thriller, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Did you see that one? Aliens came and warned us that if we didn't change our ways, they'd stop the Earth. And when we refused to give heed, they caused the Earth to stand still. I mean, looking back at it now, it's a pretty tame movie, but in the day, it was a shocker. And I understand that recently there's been a remake of the movie. I'm sure it's a lot more dramatic than the original one was. You see, that's the power of science fiction. There's this strange appeal to a world beyond their own, and many of us would like it to be real. Whether it's the current fascination with UFOs or the paranormal or Harry Potter, something inside of us wants to connect to something outside of this world. And a good science fiction writer can transport us there in a hurry.
Tell me, can you name a Jewish science fiction author or Jewish star?
Ben Stiller?
Really?
Probably not, no.
Jewish star or Jewish celebrity. We just ran into Adam Sandler. He's very Jewish.
Funny people.
Jewish?
Jewish one?
I don't know.
Steven Spielberg or something?
No, I can't. Can you?
I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Adam Sandler.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Jewish. It's the only one I can think of.
I don't know names. I'm horrible with this.
Let's think some more about this interesting connection between Jews and science fiction. Well, in the realm of TV and film, of course, you had Jews like Rod Serling, the host of the Twilight Zone, and then men like William Shatner, Captain Kirk, and Mr. Spock in Star Trek, and then, of course, Steven Spielberg with Jurassic Park. But some of the greatest science fiction writers have been Jewish, too. The greatest of them all being Isaac Asimov, the author or editor, more than 500 books. His short story, Nightfall, was hailed in 1964 as the greatest short science fiction story of all time. Not bad. His most famous work was the Foundation series, 7 volumes that he wrote over a period of 40 years. And then he was also famous for the Robot series and the Empire series. And these books created new worlds for his readers. And by getting into these books, you can enter into these new worlds. Some of the books also made for great movies as well, like the recent I, Robot movie with Will Smith based on Asimov's work. I mean, think of reading an old classic like Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth. It actually makes you wonder what's going on down there. And then if you read the book first, and then you saw the movie, it's as if you'd already been to all the places and seen all those sites already. By the way, if you're expecting me to tell you that Jules Verne was a secret Jew, he wasn't. But there are plenty of great Gentile sci-fi writers too. And anyway, it's this appeal to another world, a parallel realm that existed that made shows like The Twilight Zone so powerful. I mean, there's this other world existing next to this present world, and you never knew when you might step into it. And once you stepped in, you might never get out. Welcome to The Twilight Zone.
So, in your opinion, what is the power of science fiction?
It probably gives people hope for the future. I mean, like, people have been sold, like, the whole jets and spaceships and cities and stuff like that with robots for, you know, since forever.
I don't really watch a lot of science fiction.
Science fiction, everything that you see like in Star Trek or MIB or whatever it is, it's already there. It's just they're programming you to accept it.
The storylines the power behind the human mind.
I've read some comic books and stuff like that, you know, it's a pretty fantasy-like to me.
The possibility that it could actually happen, some of the stuff, and the interest that none of it exists yet.
As I continue to think about this connection between Jews and science fiction, I'm reminded of how supernatural and almost unbelievable our Jewish Bible is. I wonder if there's some kind of connection between Jewish heritage and Jewish imagination. Look, I'm just speculating, but consider this example. One of the biggest successes in Hollywood history was the Indiana Jones trilogy, with the fourth movie that came out in 2008 with a much older Indy. And by the way, Harrison Ford, the star of the series, is Jewish on his mother's side. I found that out when I was doing research for an earlier show. But think back to the first movie in the series, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was based on the story of the Ark that God commanded Moses to build 3,500 years ago. Now, the fact is, the Ark was lost about 2,500 years ago. The fiction is that it's in some faraway kingdom somewhere with magical powers, but they're actually archaeologists and adventurers who are still looking for this Ark, and some believe that the Indiana Jones story was based on the story of Vendell Jones, who's an archaeologist who's been looking for the Ark for decades. But look, there's more. Do you remember the ending to the movie? The Nazis broke a sacred taboo and they looked into the Ark and they were burned up from the inside out. But wasn't this made up by Hollywood? This is actually found in the biblical prophecies of Zechariah. This is what's written. And this is the plague with which the Lord will strike all the nations that attack Jerusalem. It says this, that their flesh will rot while they're standing on their feet, that their eyes will rot in their sockets. Is that wild? Or what?
Coming up next.
To me, the Bible, it's a big book of fables. I do believe that some of the stuff is historically accurate, but I don't think it's relevant in this day and time.
We've discovered that some of the greatest science fiction writers have been Jews, and well, it's possible that this is just another example of the disproportionate influence that Jews have had on the arts and sciences. We've suggested that there might be a connection between the Jewish imagination and the supernatural aspects of the Jewish Bible and Jewish history. Look, as a Jew, I feel directly connected with this supernatural history. Just the fact that we're here today, that we've been restored to our homeland, that the Hebrew language is spoken again nationally, that Jerusalem is the world's most controversial city. I mean, it sounds more like science fiction, but it's real. And think back to the Bible. Our national origins are totally supernatural. God spoke to Abraham and then appeared to him in visions and then enabled him to have a child at the age of 100, and more amazingly enabled Sarah to have a child at the age of 90. And generations later, after we'd been slaves in Egypt, God spoke to Moses in a burning bush and then sent him to deliver our people from Egypt and sent the 10 plagues on Egypt. You know, that would make for an amazing movie. Actually, come to think of it, it was quite an amazing movie that was made. But think of what actually happened. I mean, God turns the Nile River into blood. Then after that, there's the plague of frogs covering the land. And then the gnats, what, billions of them? And then the flies. And after that, the plague on the livestock. And then boils breaking out on the people. And then hail and thunder, the likes of which we could hardly imagine. And then the locusts ravaged what was left of the land. After that, 3 days of complete and total darkness. And then the death of the firstborn. I mean, it sounds like pure science fiction. But think of it, to our forefathers who experienced it, it was absolutely real. It makes me say once again, in Jewish history, truth is often stranger than fiction.
Do you think the biblical miracle stories could be true?
You know, personally, I'm an atheist.
Now that's getting pretty heavy right there.
Yes, because I am religious. I'm Christian, and this is what I grew up on. So, yes, I do believe it.
He's more religious than I am.
Yeah. Actually, he's a Messianic Jew.
Messianic Jew.
Messianic Jew.
It's possible.
I do. I definitely think they could be true.
No, they're not true, but they're inspirational.
I do.
possibly, but you know, when they talk about like Jesus doing this or him doing that, I think they probably mean it in a symbolic way.
My wife Nancy and I were both raised in Jewish homes. I was raised conservative, but for most of her childhood, she was raised Reform. And barely 10 years old, she concluded with disappointment that there was no God. You see, she saw no evidence of God in her family, and she saw no evidence of God in the synagogue. For her, the God of our traditions, the God of Exodus and miracles, was nowhere to be found in Reformed Judaism. And she really came to know him at the age of 19. It's like a dream come true. He was really there after all. You know, some of you may also have reason to question God's existence. And maybe you think the Bible is full of myths and exaggerated stories. They may be inspirational, but for you, they're just not true. The problem is the people who wrote these stories believed what they were writing, and more importantly, for them, these stories were the evidence of the reality of God. He really did send 10 plagues on Egypt. He really did split the sea and bring our people Israel out. And who can forget the Cecil B. DeMille version of that story? He really did speak to our forefathers from a burning mountain called Sinai. And it didn't stop there. For them, God kept speaking and acting. He really did bring down fire from heaven in answer to the prayer of Elijah. He really did raise a dead child in answer to the prayer of Elisha. And he really did stop the sun when Joshua was fighting against his enemies. And he really did turn the sundial back 15 degrees when he healed Hezekiah. Now, you may say, how in the world could these things be possible? I mean, messing with the orbit of the earth and the sun. And look, science keeps learning new things, and who knows how God may have adjusted things to change the appearance. But this much is sure, the Bible claims to tell a supernatural story way beyond science fiction. Is there any way it could all be true?
Dr. Brown hit the streets in the Melrose section of LA to discuss science fiction and faith.
So I was asking if you had a favorite science fiction book or movie, and you mentioned Logan's Run. Yeah, what is it about that?
I don't know. It captured me that kind of you know, at the age of 30, I think is when the government would just come in and kill you. Renew you is what they consider.
Renew you.
Yeah.
And any other favorites, science fiction?
I would say for me, Terminator.
Okay.
Because it's kind of political if you really read into the story.
Why do you think science fiction has so much power?
Science fiction is generally based on fact, but it allows you to use your imagination of what the future may or may not be. And if you read a lot of historical science fiction, like from the 50s, 60s, a lot of it has become science fact now.
It takes them away from reality. They feel that they have something to look into, investigate, research, because there's so much information out, especially with the internet.
Anything on your own?
I agree with that, yeah.
So what about just like the desire to connect with something outside of this world? Because a lot of people, they really, either they believe in this or they want to believe in it. Do you find any need for that? In other words, are you satisfied with this world is it, this life is it?
I believe in life beyond this planet, and I think there is stuff out there. It might not be what our society deems normal. I mean, it could be like a slime, a blob of slime somewhere, but it has life. I believe in that kind of stuff.
So what about the whole world of religion? And the supernatural there, and like stories in the Bible, those kind of things. What do you think about that?
To me, the Bible, it's a big book of fables. I do believe that some of the stuff is historically accurate, but I don't think it's relevant in this day and time.
Got it. And then you had a different view.
Yeah, I have a completely different view. We're very good friends.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian, but I don't really go to church. I just have my faith in Jesus Christ. But I believe that the Bible, how it was written, was a lot of people don't know. There's 66 books, 39 from the Old, 27 from the New, by 40 different authors in 3 different languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. And if you look through the stories, each story tells you how someone messed up. Moses disobeying God, whether it's Job disobeying God, but God is always sovereign and He's always there to want to forgive and want you to bring you to the truth and help through Jesus Christ your faith to change and to be better.
Still to come.
Well, I think everybody's on a journey, and it's a matter of teaching yourself and researching things. It's not about letting somebody else tell you what's right and what's wrong.
We've been talking about the ancient history of the Jewish people according to the Bible. We found that a lot of our history reads like a science fiction novel and beyond. The fascinating thing for me is that Jewish history didn't stop with the Bible. It continues to this very day. And A lot of our modern history is pretty amazing too, from the horrors of the Holocaust to the Six-Day War and the birth of the modern state of Israel. You know, with a modern history like this, it's a whole lot easier to believe the miraculous accounts in the Bible. But there's more. The biblical prophets spoke of the coming of the Messiah. And for me, along with tens of thousands of other Jews, that Messiah is none other than Jesus, Yeshua. Even his birth was supernatural. You're talking about something beyond science fiction. According to the story, an angel appeared to a virgin named Miriam, better known as Mary, and told her that she would give birth to the Son of God while she was still a virgin. Now, you might say that this whole thing sounds like hogwash, virgin birth, but let me just give you some food for thought. This whole talk of a virgin birth could actually sound like a cover-up for a kid being born out of wedlock. Who would make up a story like that? And not only so, how come there's no other world religious leader that claimed to be born of a virgin? Now, the New Testament records that what gave credence to the Messiah's supernatural birth was the fact that he performed all kinds of miracles, healing the sick, crippled, lame people, opening blind eyes, even raising the dead. I guess the real question is, did it really happen? So let me ask one last question, and you can preach to your friend here, okay? All right, I've been around a lot of healthy skepticism. I think it's fair for people to ask good questions and wonder about these things. So I appreciate what you're saying about the whole way the Bible's put together. It's supernatural. But your friend has issues with that. So how could he really know if what's written there is true?
Well, the only thing I could tell him, we don't really talk about this. He'll tell you that I don't push my belief on him at all, and I respect his position at all. But if he really
just for the cameras,
right?
Your friendship will endure anyway.
If he wants to see if it's true, the only thing I could tell him is if he wants to test it, he should ask and confess for Jesus Christ to come into his life.
I'm just saying, right? I've come through this life completely without God in my life.
You may think that, but in reality, everything that
in your reality.
Okay. From my position, I feel that, you know, there's nothing we can do without God. That is why hell is hell, because we can't even
I don't believe in hell.
Okay,
so.
Well, that's a whole different matter. But for me, I believe that if people really sincerely want to test God or test Jesus Christ, put their faith in him and see what he can do for you.
Would you say maybe you're still on a journey and you haven't arrived at your final destination yet?
Well, I think everybody's on a journey, and it's a matter of teaching yourself and, you know, researching things. It's not about letting somebody else tell you what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, so just the thing I'd encourage you is to stay on the journey.
Well, I do. I mean, I went to a really great church. I had a really great pastor. I just started reading outside of the Bible on what, you know, the actual Bible meant during the period of history in which it was written. And that's how I came to my personal conclusion.
Sure,
so.
And I appreciate that. I had to study myself because I got hit with so many objections.
Right.
Read the ancient texts, you know, the inscriptions, you know, the stones, all that stuff. And everyone I studied with was secular. I got my doctorate at New York University. Some of them were real skeptical. And then the one that was religious was an Orthodox Jew, so he didn't like what I believed, you know? So, I mean, I had to dig and then say, okay, my experience lines up with the truth. If you want to talk about a supernatural life, a life that is beyond science fiction, then you've got to talk about the life of Jesus. Let me give you some of the evidence. Unlike any other leader in history, the major details of his life were laid out hundreds of years in advance by the prophets of Israel. They talked about his supernatural birth. They talked about the kind of miracles he performed. They talked about him being human, but more than human. They talked about his death and his resurrection. Now check this out. Jewish eyewitnesses reported that during his life, he once fed 5,000 men, plus women and children, with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 pieces of fish. And according to the account, Jesus the Messiah at the end had 12 baskets left over. There was another time when there was a 12-year-old Jewish girl that had died, and her father came distraught to Jesus, to Yeshua, and he said, hey, don't fear, just believe and she'll live. And she was raised from the dead. There's something even more remarkable. Yeshua predicted his own death by crucifixion, which completely mystified his followers because they thought he was going to set up an earthly kingdom. And yet he also spoke of his resurrection from the dead. And again, eyewitnesses record that there were many Jewish men and women that saw him after he rose. And then check this out. It's recorded that 500 Jewish men saw him ascend in the clouds to heaven. But that's not even the most remarkable part of the story. You want to hear more? I'm telling you, this is beyond science fiction.
What's your opinion? Is it possible that Jesus is coming again?
He had the nerve to come down once and die for all our sins. He must love us enough to come back again.
I don't believe Jesus is coming again. I don't believe in reincarnation.
As far as like Jesus coming back, no, I don't really think there is a Jesus to begin with.
Yeah, I do. I think he will be.
Something's coming. I don't think it'll be Jesus.
I think he will be coming back as well. It's just a matter of when, and we won't know the time or the day.
So what could be more incredible than the Messiah's life, death, resurrection, and ascension to heaven? It's his return. Talk about a spectacular event. According to the Jewish writers of the New Testament, Jesus will return to earth in absolutely amazing form. The whole world will see him at once. He'll illuminate the sky like lightning as he comes in blazing fire, riding a white horse. What a picture. He'll destroy the wicked. He'll reward the righteous. He'll set up a kingdom of peace and justice here on the earth, establishing his throne in Jerusalem. Can you imagine being alive when he returns, especially if you're on the side? Now, at this point, I'd expect somebody to say to me, you actually believe this stuff? I mean, give me one reason why I should even consider it. I'll tell you what, I'll give you three. First, the prophets described in detail the major events of the Messiah's life hundreds of years before it happened, even telling us that Gentiles worldwide would follow him before his own Jewish people did. So that leads to my second reason. If the first part of the story is true, then we have good reason to believe that the rest of it will be true too. You might say, well, how in the world do I know if the first part's true, if he really had a supernatural birth and performed miracles and rose from the dead? Well, that actually leads to my third point, my third reason. If he did rise from the dead, and if he is coming again, that means he's alive right now. And if you'll call out to him sincerely, as I did 37 years ago, he'll reveal himself to you and transform your life. So look, find a quiet place, get alone, and call out to Jesus, Yeshua, with a sincere and open heart. The results will be beyond science fiction.